how Plato in Book 4 gives us a kind of argument, and it's a rather difficult set of arguments, and I'm not going to try to analyze all the details of them. I'm just going to give you what I take to be the sort of philosophical content of them that we can still find merit in. So the clue or the key to understanding Plato's psychology is to start with the notion of the good, and then think of desire, and this is the philosopher's notion of desire. It's whatever goes in your motivational set, right? So you don't get excited about it. When I was an undergraduate, this book is a very dry, boring book, but it had a kind of exciting title. It was called Pleasure and Desire. And my mother was coming to visit, and she saw it in my bookshelf and was sure that it was some sort of pornographic. And however, a few pages of reading it soon persuaded her that it wasn't very exciting. So desires aim at the good. That's the first thought. It's sort of like a picture that when you desire something, you're thinking that it's got something good about it. It may just be this, that as David Hume puts it, your desire colors it that way. So the very fact that you desire it kind of gives it a glow, right? It becomes something you want, right? That's the thought. And what Plato is going to do is say, that's a good first start, but it's going to hide something. And we can see that it's going to hide something if we focus on the notion of lack of self-control or weakness of will, as acrosia, the Greeks call it. So I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I just want to say this, that we know that we sometimes don't go for what we know to be the good. We know that it's better to do one thing, but we do something else. It's a commonplace of our psychologies that we're prone to weakness of will, or lack of self-control. Weakness of will. Acrosia. The alpha privative of the first A is like our non. So it says you lack krate. You're not able to control yourself. And we know that we suffer from this. If we make all desires be for the good, we're going to have a very hard time explaining how there can be weakness of will, right? Because it's sort of like this, right? So I know that I should study tonight because I've got an exam tomorrow, and actually it's the MCAT, and I want to go to medical school, so it's really important. It's going to affect my whole life plan. And I know there's one little thing I've really got to revise because I didn't really get it clearly, and I know that I should spend a couple of hours going over it. There's always questions on it. And one of my friends comes by and says, oh, you've been working too hard. You need to relax, get a good night's sleep. You thought about that. You're just going to aggravate yourself, get anxious, you won't sleep. Come on, we'll have a beer. You'll sleep well, and you'll ace the exam tomorrow. And you know he's wrong. I mean, it's not a question. You just know this is bad advice. But the idea of relaxing, of having a beer, of kicking back for a while, of getting a good night's sleep, that's pretty attractive. And so you do it. And then the next day on the MCAT, there's the 10 questions on the one thing you didn't revise, right? And then you say, why did I do that? It was so dumb. I knew it was stupid, but I did it. I did it anyway, even though I knew it wasn't good. How? And then there's this, right? How could I have done it? How dumb can you be? How could I have done it? Right? And now just think about it. Here's the thought is, well, look, all desire is for the good, right? So you must have, in going for the beer, actually thought, at least then, that that was better than studying. Because otherwise you wouldn't have done it. So the thought is, all desire is for the good, and your strength of desire, which one is the strongest, depends on how much good you think there is there. So this is what, and so Socrates saying, going for this, not the Socrates we find in the Republic, but his earlier self, he says, there's no such thing as weakness of will. Well, look, I just explained why, right? If the story I just told you is right, your desires are stronger, they're all for the good, and the stronger desire is for the greater good, then if whatever you act on, that'll be the stronger desire, you must have thought that was better, at least then, even if later you think, bleh. And so he says, really, it's all about measurement. It's not about weakness of will, it's simply about, right, whether you're correctly measuring. Right? So in that moment, when you make the measurement, that as he says, the present pleasure seems bigger than the future good, but that's just a mismeasurement. And what you're regretting later is that you didn't measure it correctly. Therefore, there's no such thing as weakness of will. There's simply failure to measure correctly, or an epistemic failure. It's not a weakness, it's a failure of your knowledge. And that's wrong. Right? There is weakness of will. We all know that, right? And we know that it isn't about measuring either. It's something about some different phenomenology. And yet we seem caught. If we say desire is for the good, and the stronger desire is for the greater good, no weakness of will. So if we've got desire for the good, and stronger desire for greater good, the result will be none of that. Right? There won't be any weakness of will, there won't be any accuracy, there won't be any lack of self-control. There'll just be failure to measure correctly. Now, that argument has had a lot of legs. We can see Donald Davidson, famous philosopher of the 20th century, American philosopher, who gives a very similar kind of line. He just says, no, look, the argument's very straightforward. It's just got two premises and a conclusion, the past kind of arguments. And it looks just really, solid. We've got to work around it. And he goes through long things about detaching conclusions from premises and, so a big load of stuff. To do this, and really it's a hopeless enterprise. You're not going to solve the problem that way. Why? Oh, because our robust sense of what weakness of will is like constantly militates against our believing some story like that. It's just not what it feels like. It's not this. You don't ever think it's better to get the beer. You never have that thought. What you do is you go have the beer. You're not busy thinking, well, it would be so much better if you don't have to be doing that at all. You just act on it. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you could have some kind of self-doxastic states, not necessarily believe, like in say a credence.
Yeah.
That I hope that getting a beer might be a better idea. Maybe I won't be tested on those.
Yeah. So it doesn't. If you keep it cognitive, right? It doesn't matter what kind of, whether it's a credence or some lower level that's not quite rise to the level of belief or assertion or confidence. Thought is really what happens is however we're to explain it, you do go and have the beer, right? And if we think that there's, so next day, right, when you soberly looking at it again, you know already when you hear it, you shouldn't do this. It's not the better thing to do. So we've got a problem, right? Because you simultaneously judge it's far better to say than work, but you don't do it. It's not as if, right, you're confused about the value. That's that you don't do it even though you're clear-headed about the value. And that's the way it often feels. I know it's better. But I get seduced, right? That's the sort of feeling it is, right? I get nudged in the wrong direction. So if you try to do it cognitively, right, you're still going to face the sort of problem that somehow or other that isn't the way it seems to feel. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
But the thing is, you're not necessarily, you can be not necessarily confused about what is the best, better thing to do. You could be confused about what's your stronger desire. Like, is the desire to relax stronger, or is the desire to...
Okay, so I think it is about strength. Okay. But then what we have to be able to do, so we can of course help ourselves to what's essentially a metaphor, strength of desire. What exactly is that, and how do you measure it? If it's this, you measure that a desire is stronger if it's the one that causes the action. You're not really explaining anything. You need an independent measure of the strength of the desire. So I think that, anyway, let's just accept that, you know, the philosophical story isn't over. We don't actually yet, I think, have a good enough theory that just commands all of our assent. So, you know, there's room for wiggle, and you might want to take it. But I think there's a really compelling Platonic solution to the problem, and I find it very hard to improve on. So what Plato says, so the Socrates thought is this: it's not in human nature, as he puts it, to go for what you know not to be good, and it's not in human nature to go for a lesser good when you can get a bigger one. That's just not how we are, right? Really, he has got no more by way of evidence than that. He just kind of says, look, just think about it. And I think when you do think about it, you think, that's right. Then you think about it a little bit more and you think, but we don't always do that. We do succumb to weakness of will. What's the issue? And so what Plato does is this. He says, all that's true. It's true that we don't go for what we know to be bad. We don't go for the lesser of two goods. We don't go for the greater of two evils. All that's true. But that doesn't prevent weakness of will. Why? Because there are elements in our psychology, things in our motivational set, that aren't for the good. They aren't for the bad either. They're for other things. And here's the thought of it. So what we want to do is take the desires, so this is our motivational set, and we want to say that in it are so things that are not for the good. But they're not for the bad. They're just, when we characterize them as, we say, in a good, independent way. So here are the examples that Plato gives. So he says, in the motivational set are appetites, appetitive desires, or we'll just call them appetites, it's shorter. They are members, they're elements of the motivational set, these appetites. And these are not good relative. So that's the insistence that you find. He says, thirst is for drink, not for drink that's good for you. Good drink, that is drink that's good for you. Hunger is for food, not for food that's good for you. You don't need to attribute to a creature that's got hunger, thirst, and sexual desire any calculation as to the overall good of satisfying it. It's enough. And so the thought is, even creatures with very simple psychologies, much simpler than ours, no capacity for that sort of reflection on the overall good. So when your dog is eating the dog food, the dog is not thinking, you know, it would be good for me to eat a lot of this dog food because that'll contribute to my overall happiness. The dog just wolfs, if the dog is hungry, it just wolfs down the food till it stops being hungry, right? Or maybe even goes on, if you have a certain kind of dog, just goes on as long as there's food in the bowl, it goes on eating it, right? And so the thought is that and then he gives a little argument for this. So the technical details of the argument are really kind of interesting, but they're a little outre. So he talks about, he says, drink, thirst rather, insofar as it is, right? Dipse kathhosan, dipse esti, right? Thirst insofar, so special little bit of technical apparatus. Drink insofar as its, thirst rather, insofar as its thirst is just for drink, not for good drink. And a way to think of this is this. It's the proper object. And this too is a bit of technical vocabulary. We don't need to worry about it, but I'll tell it to you anyway. The proper object of thirst is drink. So the thought is this: what does something have to be in order for me to feel thirsty towards it? The only thing is I have to believe it's drink. Right? As long as it satisfies that, it's okay to thirst for it. Consider a few other proper objects that are going to get the drift of it, but again, I don't insist that we all understand that. It doesn't matter. What's the proper object of stealing? What can you steal? Well, only something that belongs to somebody else. You can't steal your own stuff, right? You can only steal somebody else's stuff. What's the proper object of divorcing? Your own spouse. You can't divorce somebody else's spouse. You can only divorce your own, and so on. There's a whole lot of them. So he says, the greater is greater than the smaller, and the much greater than the much smaller, and the going to be smaller, the going to be smaller, to the going to be larger, right? All of these are proper objects of relations. They're modal, modal features of the relata. So you're related to this by thirst, if that's drink, or going back to not you putting it normatively, if you believe it's drink. So you know those cases where, I'm sure you've encountered them, they used to happen all the time, but I think wax fruit has gone out of style. And people that have a fruit basket with a beautiful looking fruit in it. And you might reach out to buy it, and then you discover that it's not fruit, it's wax fruit or plastic fruit or some damn thing, right? And now you don't want to eat it anymore. Why? Well, what have you discovered? You've discovered that it's not food. So similarly, you might be given one of those trick glasses, right, that look as if they're half full of water or gin or something. And you pick it up and you, well, no, it's not, right? Or you think that this is drinkable, and I tell you, no, it's not water, it's sulfuric acid, man. You're in the chem lab, you don't put everything in your mouth. It's not a good idea, right? Okay, right? So that's the idea. And so he's got a little bit of a theory behind this, but we don't need to buy the theory. All we have to do is to accept the truth of the conclusion and think that it's credible on its own terms. You don't need to have a rich psychology, a rich enough psychology to actually evaluate the overall good in order to be hungry, thirsty, or horny, right? You just don't need it. That's the idea. So let's factor it in. Let's say there's another advantage. It helps us to solve the problem of weakness. Well, how so? Well, look, the doctor has told me no liquids, right, for the next 24 hours. You're going to have surgery. You can't drink anything, not even a sip of water, nothing. Between now and surgery, nothing. No solid food, no liquid. So you know you shouldn't, right? You get a raging thirst, right? And you're really thirsty. It feels like the desert in your mouth. You long for water. You're dreaming of water. You're fantasizing large, cool glasses of water, right? You long for water, but you don't drink any. Why? Well, look, what you judge is that your desire for water is not a good desire for you to satisfy. Notice it's reflective on the desire. Your second order desire takes account of your thirst and then says, no, right? No, it might be, however, right, and this often happens, as you know, right? But though you've done that, your thirst just overwhelms you, and you think, oh, just a little sip. I'll just moisten. I'll just a tiny bit, just a soupçon of the, all right, just a little bit. And so you take the glass, right, it's cool and filled with luscious water, and you take a little sip. And you take another little sip. Then you take another little sip. And finally, the glass is gone. You've little sipped your way all the way to, right, perdition. So when you show up the next day for surgery and the doctor says, have you had any liquids? You know that you better not lie, because clearly there was a reason you weren't supposed to have them. And so you say, oh, well, you're going to be charged for the surgery because we booked the whole thing, and it's like $10,000, and you know, you still can't have it. You've got to come back next time. So next time, don't drink the water, okay? If you've got a particularly fascist doctor, that's the kind of thing that happens, right? And when you miss your dental appointment, they charge you for it. Okay, got it? So notice that it's a beautiful little solution to the problem. It says, no, there's nothing in us, nothing in human nature that goes for the bad. Your thirst is not a satanic thing that says, no, you know, go for the bad. I mean, look, you're not supposed to drink. You're not really thirsty. Think how great it would be to violate your instruction, to disobey. That's not what's happening, right? You're not thinking, how naughty. Right? But it's not like, you know, in boarding school when they tell you no eating in the dorm after lights out, where you think, absolutely we're going to eat in the dorm after lights out. Why? Well, because we're transgressing their damn instruction. We could care less about the food. It's the violation of authority and rules and showing what you're made of that makes this forbidden fruit. Not, okay. So that's not what's going on, though, in the case where you succumb to your thirst. All that's going on in that case is that your thirst is so insistent. Right? I'm sure that you've all, well, I won't speak for you, I'll just speak for myself, as I don't want to attribute psychological states to you that you might not like to have attributed to you. But you know, when your sexual desire becomes insistent, it starts to operate on your fantasy. You start thinking a lot more about sex. You start, and even though what you want to do is focus on the work in front of you, do this geometrical proof, that's not, your sexual desire is not interested in your geometrical proof. It just keeps, every time you draw a little triangle, it projects a little sexual image onto it. Every time you know, and so finally what you're thinking is, probably I should try to have sex soon, because I'm certainly not going to be able to focus on the geometrical proof until I do. Well, these are the cases, that, and same with hunger, right? You're suddenly ravenously hungry. You're studying, and you're ravenously hungry, and you know that if you don't go get something to eat, your studying is finished, because all that's going to happen is your stomach will growl more and more until finally you feel it. And our appetites, now we could give a little story. We could say it's good for us to have such elements in our psychology that aren't in this way under the control of our estimations of the good. Well, consider, for example, if you've got a, suppose all your desires were subject to your estimation of the good. So they really were Socratic in the sense that they're all sensitive to your estimations of your overall good. Suppose that were true. And suppose, for example, you've got a misperception of your overall good. I mean, suppose you're anorexic, for example, and you think that it's just not possible to be too thin. So you think that the good condition of you is one in which you really are skeletal. You're wrong. But now notice that if your appetites are all under the control of your estimation of the good, they won't be any stronger than your estimation of how good it is for you to eat. Well, that's a disaster. That's not a good thing for you to be able to so control your appetite that when it's actually urging you to do something you need to do, you don't feel anything. So you never get hungry, right? Why? Well, because you never want to eat, and you consider it good not to, right? So you only have little nibbles every night. That would be very bad, and the same is true for thirst and other things. Our appetites play a different role in our psychology from other sorts of desires. They're there to, as we would say, reset our projects when, if we don't, our well-being, our health and existence are threatened. Right? So we don't want them to be too subordinate to our overall estimations, because those estimations are not always correct. That's one of the reasons. We don't want to be, right, that nothing reminds, it's like this, right? Why do you have an alarm clock? Why does the alarm clock go off even when you don't want it to, right? So you've set it, it says get up at 7, right? It rings, right? I don't want to get up, right? Well, why isn't it like this? See, your alarm clock detects your desire to sleep, and says, oh, he doesn't want to wake up. Okay, I won't wake. Oh, what good of an alarm clock is that, right? It's hopeless, right? Because you want the alarm clock to wake you up no matter what you want. And in the same way, you've got desires that are like the alarm in the alarm clock. Let's say, now it's time to eat, now it's time to eat. Breathe, time to breathe, right? You need those. Things have to be on automatic pilot, because if they weren't, we would over-control them. They'd be too subordinate to our life projects. And if our life projects were in various ways not good ones for us to have, that's just a way to sort of see it. Okay, so that's how to solve the problem of weakness of will. It's to include in the motivational stuff, and to see why you include in your motivational stuff desires or appetites. And now Plato just calls those the appetitive desires. So he's given you the definition of the class. They're good independent, right? They're not good relative. They don't require you to estimate the good. What rather, where the estimations come in, is you actually look at, among other things, those very appetites, and you say, that's a good one to satisfy, that one needs to be moderated, that one's too strong, that's bad for me, right? You actually have attitudes to your own motivational stuff, and then it's not that the desire already includes the reflection, it's that the reflection looks at the desire and says yes or no to it. Yeah. Yeah.
In the alarm clock example, I don't see what is the actual distinction between your desire to sleep and your evaluative desire to wake up. Because as I see it, it's just desires at different times when you're asleep or when you just got woken up. You just simply don't have the desire to wake up at all. Like, you don't even see it as an evaluative desire. You just don't have that kind of desire to wake up at all. And maybe like if you later have a date or something, and on that date you're like, okay, wow, it's a good thing that I did wake up. Or if you missed
well, I
it.
think that, yeah, so if the salient, so simile, so to speak, or sort of like that, but only in this respect, right? It's not that you set the alarm clock, of course, thinking rationally. It's not that you have this basic desire to set alarm clocks. That's rather that you think, well, I need to wake up at 8 o'clock because I have to study and do work. So that's your rational desire, right? And that makes you turn on the alarm clock. Now the alarm clock is on. But suppose now that you've turned it on, suppose that doesn't guarantee that it will ring. Suppose that the alarm clock actually reads not your irrational decision, but your appetite, your desire to sleep, right? And so maybe it does a little test, right? It goes beep and sees what happens, and then it goes, okay, I won't ring. He wants to sleep, I won't ring. So then you'd violate the whole point of setting the alarm. So the only thought is, it's good that there are things that don't read our desire at the moment of which they have to cause us to do the action. So we want to, it's just to get across the idea that appetites are relevantly like alarm clocks, but except that in this case, we don't set them, right? They're actually there. So think of somebody else who's setting the alarm clock for you, right? Your mother says, hey, you have to get up at 8 o'clock and go to school. I'll set your alarm, right? You might not want to set it because you already don't want to get up at 8 o'clock, right? So then alarm clock better not be dependent upon what you feel at 8 o'clock in the morning. It better be independent. Yeah.
How do we know, like, when our appetites, like in such a situation, ought to be subordinated to these, like, higher order rational desires, or when should the appetites take precedence?
Yeah, that's a very good.
You know what I mean? How do we go about?
Yes, that's a very good question. So look, I mean, consider that sometimes so what we want to be able to do is say, sometimes we should control our appetites, but sometimes we shouldn't. How are we to get that right? And that's the next sort of step in the story. So once we have a complex psychology, the issue of ordering the elements become important. So let's imagine that they're all at the same level. They're all, say, appetites. Then the only thing that can happen is one is stronger than the other. One drives out the other drives out the one. So it'll be like this, right? You'll do whichever you have the stronger desire for. So if you want to have sex is stronger than your desire to have a drink, you'll have sex if you can rather than drink. But that's the only kind of order there is, just the strength of your already existing appetites. There's nothing else you can do with them because there's nothing else in your motivational set to give you the oomph to do anything. But now once we see that there are different citizens, so to speak, of the motivational set with different roles, then we'll have different principles of ordering. That's the pretty, sort of one of the fallouts of the story. So we've got the appetites clear, right? Here they are. These are the good, non-good relative. Now let's look at the other pole, the maximally good relative. So these are going to be the ones that Plato calls the rational desires. They're based on rational calculation. Now we've got, in the motivational set, right, as well as the appetites, we've got rational desires. And what's good? What are they? Well, here's what I'm telling you about them, right? They're maximally good relative. You can't make sense of these without bringing in the good and the notion of there being max. So consider the following. And Plato gives you lots of little examples like this. So in the case of the appetite, it says, look, there are just lots of cases where people really have a strong urge to drink, but they don't. How are we to explain that? And he says that's a commonplace. But then he also gives us other examples, right? The Odysseus example. So Odysseus comes home, he finds all of these people trying to have sex with his wife, the suitors, right, on eating them out of house and home while they're sitting around there trying to woo Penelope, who, as you know, is weaving all night weaving all day and unraveling all night, so she won't have to marry any of them. And Odysseus is furious when he comes home. He sees the serving maids in his house sleeping with the suitors and misbehaving and his property being wasted. His anger rises and he thinks, he wants to kill them all right then. But reason says, no. Then you'll be able to kill all the suitors too. So don't go rushing into, just because you're a little angry now at those, don't give yourself away to wait. Anyways, okay. Right? Now that too happens to us, right? We want something very good. Here's an obvious kind of thing, right? Maybe you insult me, or you get the better of me in some exchange, and it really pisses me off, right? And I long to be able to strike back. Right? But I realized that it would be very imprudent to do so. So I wait. And then when I get a chance, I hit you back, right? We're all like this. We're awful. But there's a lot of us, right? You know it yourself, right? We're not like, right? That's what we're like. And right, so often, even though we have a very strong urge to do something, right, we don't do it because we see it's not in our best interest. So even if we feel huge rage, right, welling up in us, we may repress it because we think it's not a good idea. By the way, there's also, as you know, the other one, which you can simulate rage because you think it's in your interest to look angry, even though you don't feel particularly angry at all. I know I'm supposed to be angry at that. I'm not really, but I think that if you don't show outrage, other people think you're sort of weird. So I'm going to show outrage at it too. Oh, really? Women are treated worse than men? God, that's infuriating, isn't it? No, but it's good to say that kind of thing because women like it, right? I mean, you can imagine that going on. Okay, so we've got rational desires. They're maximally good relative. How are we to understand it? Well, they're like this. They calculate our best overall interests. As Plato says, they look at our motivational stuff as well as the world, and they think, what would it be overall best for me to do? So they're the ones which we think of as our rational self-interest. The one where we estimate, we look at all the things, and we think, this is what overall, this is what I should do. Right? So these are globally responsive to our good, right? Because they consider all the relevant factors, and then here a desire forms. And that requires there to be desires that are sensitive to that already. So if no desire, so suppose you calculate the overall good, right? And you see that the overall good requires you now to do such and such, whatever it is. But nothing in your motivational stuff responds to that calculation, right? You've calculated, but nothing, there's no room for it. Just nothing happens. Well, that's no good, right? You've got to have something in your motivational set that actually is sensitive to the overall good. That was, Plato says, is a good, maximally good relative desire. It sort of waits. It doesn't act until you've calculated what the overall good is, and then it's for that. So that requires that to be present. And we just as we might not have started understanding what appetites were, but now we do. But rational desires are kind of gimme, right? We all get that, and we know that we have them. We know we have desires like that for our overall good. We also know that they're sometimes defeated by other things, but we know that we have them. There's nothing particularly surprising about that. So now in our motivational set now, we've got, at the one hand, I'll do it this way, down below, we've got appetites. And these are ranked just by their good relativity. Right, and up here we've got rational desires. Maximally good. And then Plato comes up with another very important bit of our psychology. He says they're, in addition to these two, they're also spirited desires. And that has caused readers of the Republic to pull their hair out. So you hear ridiculous things like this. Well, Plato already has 3 parts to the city, now he needs 3 parts to the soul. And you think, oh, if you only had 2 parts to the soul, why didn't you just make 2 parts to the city? I mean, come on, it's not as if, he found the city and it had 3 parts, and you go, oh my God, what am I going to do? But he made the whole damn thing, so he'd do it. If you're going to put 103 parts in the city, if you want to. So the question can't be that spirited desires are somehow or other a made-up category, and they're not. Spirited desires are part good. They don't depend on an estimation of the overall good, but they're not like appetites in that they don't take the good into consideration at all. But they take only a partial good, a bit of the good into consideration, not the overall good. Let's take a very simple example. So let's take fear. What kind of a desire or a motivating factor is fear? Let's say an emotion, probably, or something like that. But we don't care what it is. We just know that it motivates you to act. So think of fear, right? So you live in a world where, and you're already primed for this, where little black things about this size that are black, cause fear reactions even in very tiny infants. Why? Well, evolutionarily, that got hardwired in. Well, better to stay away from this. I mean, it might be harmless, but it's better not to find out by letting it bite you, whether or not it's a good thing. Right? So you quickly, right, but notice that in that case, how do we explain what fear is? So let's say we just have that fear reaction. Well, what is going on? Well, notice in the story I told you, I already brought in the notion of our good, right? And so this was you got this motivating force in your motivational set because it benefits you to have that one in your motivational set, right? You need something that's responsive to danger, and that better operate quickly, fast and dirty, right, rather than accurate but slow, right? So you need a fast processor for evaluation of things like threats that, right, you better not stay around too long doing the calculation. It's better to be out of there, even though you didn't need to run away, than it is to stay and be wrong, right? The false positives are less harmful than the false negatives, right? So you make a judgment, you're wrong, the thing bites you, you die. That's much worse than if you run away a few times from things that aren't dangerous. So we need, in this sense, we need desires that are to be explained in terms of their contribution to a good, their evaluation of something as good or bad, dangerous or threatening, right? But don't take into account the overall good. So let me give an example, right? So you you're in a field and with your girlfriend, and you want to impress her about it. You want to look good in her eyes, right? And a bull comes charging towards you, and your fear says, run away, right? But your desire to look good says, no, there's no real danger here, right? I know how to deal with the bull, right? So I whip off my magic red cape, and I know it's not very impressive, right? And I say, no, darling, let's move out. I'll hit the bull. You move slowly away. I'll distract the bull. And you think, oh, what a courageous guy. I mean, he was so cool the way he handled that. I mean, I was terrified. But he just, and we do this all the time, right? We're able to properly inhibit, right, or respond to our initial emotional reactions because we see that another good is threatened by them. But that doesn't mean that the emotions themselves are things that we don't want to have in our motivational set, right? Because we know we need lots and lots of fast, dirty motivators, right? Where something is a threat, especially easy, but in a whole lot of other cases, we just have lots and lots of emotions that are responsive to a good, but only a small bit of the good. So let's take the one that Plato focuses on, namely the desire for honor. Now, if you've been reading the stuff I assigned, you'll know a lot about those, but I'm just going to recapitulate a little bit of it. When we try to explain what honor is, right, what it is you desire when you desire honor, well, part of it is you want approval from someone, right? So honor is given by somebody else to you, right? You need to get to be approved. So honor is at one level approval. You want to be approved of. Now notice that when you think about what that is, so how do you go about getting the approval of people? Right, just think about it. Right, so you need to embody, right, something that they think is good. So in the notion of approval, right, you've got this, right? So here's the approving class. These are the people who dole out the honor by giving you approval. And what do you have to do to? Well, you have to see what they think is good and then embody that. Right? So if what you want to be is to win the beauty contest, you better find out what the judges go for. If you want to ace the exam, you better find out what the examiner thinks is good. If you want to, right? So you always have to, in looking for approval, you have to make reference to a good. You can't get what approval is if you don't already have the notion of a good that you can embody, and that will then, because of the judgments of the approving class, win you their love and approval. Without that, you don't get it. So what you think is, the approving class, what do they think good? So let's suppose that let it be F. They think being F is really good. So if you want honor and approval, you'll focus on that. Right? You'll focus on what they're going to see. So here's the way it fits with our notion of, right, we kind of saw political necessity for having in the city, not just the appellate producers, but the guardians. The guardians were motivated not by predominantly by their appetites, but by their desire for approval of the rest of us. That's what made them good people to be guardians of us. If they competed with us for appellate goods, why would we give them guns, right? So we give them guns because we want them, we train them, bring them up, socialize them, educate them, so that what they want and what they go for is not in competition with us. What they want from us is approval, and we give it because they're good guardians, right? Yes! Give them a medal, right? Cool. They love them, they're cheap, generate a lot of them, give them the medals, promote them, right? It's great. Napoleon understood this perfectly. Medals are really cheap. People seem to like them. So, you know, decorate them. It's much easier than giving them a lot of money, right? Okay. So that's the thought. Now notice, to the degree that we're able to track, so here we're evaluating the soldier police, and it's not really hard. We did it just all up by thinking about it. It's not hard to see what you want them to be like. Right? You want them to be temperate, you want them to be courageous, you want them to be, you know, thoughtful and able to evaluate situations well, you know, and you approve of them if they do all that, and you disapprove of them if they don't. So if they want to get your honor, they have to embody the temperance, courage, etc., that you value. And so remember, the puzzle was to show that that was somehow good for them. It's not hard to see that it's good for us. Right? If we could make robots to guard us, and we will be able to do that soon probably, right? We just think about how you'd program them. Well, you wouldn't want avaricious, sleepy, violent robots, right? Drunken robots, that would be a pain, right? And or robots that took your stuff, or robots that were asleep when you needed them to come and protect you. I'm sorry, I'm sleeping now, right? Get raped tomorrow. I can't come now, right? I'm asleep. Get stolen from tomorrow. Get killed tomorrow. It's after 5, right? No, you want them to be ready. Okay. So that's what you're thinking about. Now notice what's happened is you've had to include in the motivational set of the guardians a whole set of desires that are desirous of a certain kind of good, honor. But now notice another thing. Okay, so right, when we change the approving class, we change F. So for example, we in our case, we're looking at the guardians for the ideal city. We know what we want them to be like. But suppose, for example, that we're a tyrannical oligarchy, right? There are 9 of us, and we want everything for ourselves. So when we look at what the guardians should be, well, we want the guardians who are loyal to us, but don't care about them at all. So we don't care whether they go protect the non-oligarchs. We care only if they protect us. So maybe we think this, you know, all that taxation that we pay to have a police force and a fire brigade and everything that protects everyone, that's just money wasted. We should have a fee for services, right? We should have a kind of mercenary police force and a mercenary fire brigade, and they should be responsive to the people who pay them the most. Isn't that the way it should be? I mean, isn't that the capitalist way? Pay for stuff? Nobody should be getting stuff for free. They should be getting what they pay for. Great, the oligarchs say. Okay, so we'll hire a top-notch bunch of people to protect us. Oh, they'll protect you if you pay them. No, you can't. Right? So notice that now we're selecting our bunch of mercenaries. What do we want them to be like? Well, quite different from what we're thinking about when we think we want a police force and a fire brigade and everything. But equally, that is just and takes care of all of us on the basis of need. We can continue this by looking at doctors. What kind of doctors would we want? Well, if we're the oligarchs, if we've got loads of money, we always think it's great if people pay for stuff. Why? Because we can, right? If we've got no money, we always think that it's better if we don't have to pay for it because we don't have any money, and the political system operates to try to take care of both of us to some extent. But if it gets really unbalanced, it stops taking care of those who are at the lower end of the spectrum. Okay, so notice that right now we can ask this. So, to which notion of honor should the spirit of desires be correlated? Right? Should they be the one they'd be in the oligarchy, or should they be the one they'd be in a just society? And the thought is, well, we're designing a just society, so we want them to be motivated by the notion of honor that would be the right one in such a society. So what we're saying is, don't be the guardians like in an oligarchy. Be guardians in the best city because that's the one we're designing. Of course, we have the future problem to show that the spirit of desires that are formed in your motivational set if you're a guardian in the best city are good for you. That they're good for the rest of us is not a problem to see, right? We can see that easily. We know what they should be, right? Okay. So, that's what the spirit of desires are. So now consider that the reason they're not maximally good dependent is that honor is not the only component in the good, right? You might, in some cases, you should sacrifice your desire for honor for your overall good, right? And that shows you that honor is not the overall good, right? Because there's no cases where you should sacrifice the overall good for the overall good, right? That's, or the overall good for honor. That would make you an honor lover, right? And you don't want to be an honor lover if you can avoid it, because you want to be in that position where you're maximally sensitive to your overall good. Honor is part of it. We all need a little love and approval. But when we become such that that's the major thing we want, we become, right, hostage. We become too focused on what other people think of us, and we stop having integrity and so on of our own, because we just need love and approval too much. Yeah.
A clarification question regarding the approving class. Like,
Yeah.
when we're designing a society, there's no reason to assume that every individual, like, even if you're not tyrants, would think, would want anything like a just citizen. Like, I want protection. I want more protection out of
Yeah.
people. When both crimes are happening, I was like, save me. Don't save the other person. Like, so what gives incentive to the guardians to say, okay, I want to satisfy
yeah.
this overall approval and not just like maximally this
Yeah.
person's approval because it
Yeah,
just...
so that's a very good question. I think, so here's the way to think about it. So at the first pass, what we're doing now is we're designing a just society in which the citizens are themselves acculturated and socialized to be just. So they won't have those desires. That gives us a problem. The problem is to show that they're happier in the society where they have the just desires than they would be in the one where they had much more stronger self-interest desires. So you, in a way, we're pushing the poles right in the carpet, right? So we're saying, you see what the goods would be if you lived in a just society. You see what you would want, right, if you were. So notice that if we do the kind of Rawls like veil of ignorance for you, you won't make that decision. Because you might end up being one of them, not you, right? You might end up thinking, you might be in the class that you just said, well, don't protect them, protect me more, right?
Yeah, I understand how in a Rawlsian veil of ignorance sense, I would say that, okay, it's better to live in this just society where I desire kind of this maximum equality for everyone. But the thing is, for guardians, it's different because they depend on the proving class's conscious, like not conscious, their actual approval. So it's not that if they go through the veil of ignorance, they would realize that it's better for them. But they are actually.
But even beyond the veil of ignorance, they can make judgments about what kind of guardians they want to have in their society. That's a big part of what goes on there. So they don't make a judgment that they'll be a guardian. They make a judgment that there will need to be guardians, and now what kind of people should they be? So, okay, so let's recognize that we've got a further problem. Plato at some point is going to have to prove to us that all of this makes everybody maximally happy. And he's not doing that now. What he's doing now is he's setting up our psychology and our society in ways that mirror each other, right? He's shown that they mirror each other, and that's going to have consequences for the very question that came off of your question, in fact, of how do you design your motivational stuff to make you maximally happy. When it's just at the level of appetites, there's no real issue. There's no design. It's just which ones are stronger. So you end up, as Plato would say, with the so-called democratic person, who's ruled by whatever appetite just happens to be stronger. But once you see that there are elements in the psychology that's richer than that, then you have to think of how should they all be fitted together so as to maximally promote my overall good. Okay, So, we're clear that we do have these kinds of three motivating factors, right? It's not, we do want honor and approval, unless we're pathological cases. We have appetites, we want to satisfy them. And we've got desires for the overall good. And we recognize that we really want the desires for the overall good to be what settle any disputes, right? So we always want them to be stronger than any competing desires. Well, it's not in human nature to go for lesser than the best, right? We really do want that to be what we go for. So we won't want to have weakness of will. It's possible you can have them, but we want to exclude it by designing our motivational sets so that we won't succumb, we won't be subject to it. Even though it's possible, it'll be minimally likely for us. For Socrates, it's logically impossible for there to be weakness of will. We just want it to be psychologically unlikely or maximally unlikely that we'll succumb to it.
I was just going to ask, like, I've been taught before, like, I think the first time I was taught in the Republic, a professor told me that you could kind of think of it as, like, your spirited desires almost, like, mediate between your rational and appetitive desires. But now, after listening to you, I'm thinking that's incorrect.
It's false, because that would give them, that would give them the ruling position. They'd be kind of like the mediator. So your rational desire would say, you know what the best thing overall is to, have the spinach salad for lunch. And your appetites say, no, I want the Big Mac. And your spiritual desires come in and they say, well, have a little bit of the Big Mac and then, salad. You know, a little bit of Big Mac and a little bit of salad, right? So split the difference. That would make the soldier police the best ones, but that's not true, right? Politically, the soldier police are elements in the society that are subject, so to speak, first of all, to the Constitution and the ones who design it. The ones who make the game plan for the overall society assign a role to soldier police. Now, soldier police are very good at guarding and all that stuff, but there's nothing yet in anybody's psychology that tells you what is it good to be what makes you good at estimating the overall good. Wisdom has yet to be introduced and explained, and Plato is going to spend some time on that. But are we clear about all of this? Any questions? Yeah.
I mean, if by mediator you meant the part that would make you want to act or compel you to act?
No,
I wouldn't say that's true, but I mean...
Yeah. No, all of these things can compel you to act. Your appetites can compel you to act. Your rational desires can compel you to act. It's true that your spirited desires can have a sort of policing function in your psychology, subject to the control of the overall good. So, in the example that Plato gives, Leontius, who seems to be a real person, who is famous for his love of boys as pale as corpses, right? Leontius is walking by the executioner's place outside the walls of Athens, and he sees all of these naked corpses, and of course they're all as pale as corpses. So he feels an appetitive sexual desire to look at them, but at the same time he thinks it's really, someone with my social status shouldn't be looking at those kinds of things, right? That's unseemly, right? So it's a bit like if you were looking at some porn and somebody came by and you didn't want to be caught doing it, and you felt like it would be inappropriate, so for you to be caught out of, I shouldn't be doing that, right? And so he says, finally he succumbs to his appetites and holds open his eyes with his fingers and says, get your fellow the filthy sight, right? Or sort of like he just gives in. So that's a case where spirit has failed to overpower appetite. Because here's it's a love of honor that says don't look at these naked corpses. But the appetite proves stronger. Of course, could go the other way, right? But it's not doing any mediating in the sense of judgment mediating, right? And it's not doing any particular, it has a motivational role of the same sort as appetite and rational desires. But of course it also has a place, because it is directed at certain aspects of the good, it's going to be sensitive to how other elements in the psyche respond to that good. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know, I just feel like sometimes a spirited desire compels one in a particular sort of way.
Oh, of course it does, yeah.
Very differently from what a rational desire would.
I think
it's much stronger, it seems, in a way.
Well, it depends. So we haven't put any content on rational desire yet. all we've done is to say that it's for the overall good, but we haven't fleshed that out. So we might think that rational desires are somehow kind of weak, right? And Plato goes along with this to some degree. He says spirited desires are on the side of rational desires unless you've been badly brought up. So there's a coordination that will occur. Roughly speaking, there is built in, even to the notion, as we'll see, Aristotle points this out. He says, look, you don't want to be approved of by idiots. You want to be approved of by people whose judgment you think is worth something, right? You want to win you want to get the Nobel Prize for Literature because the committee is actually sensitive to the value of literature, and not because they've decided that, well, Japan hasn't had a Nobel Prize for 15 years, let's give it to somebody in Japan. You want to win it, earn it. You don't want to get the gold medal because somebody likes to look at you. You want to get the gold medal because you actually did win the race or the tennis match or any of those things. So that's a part where, even when we look at spirited desires, we can see that if you push on them, they'll tend towards being in accord with the rational desires. So the thought will be, when I judge that something is overall good, then I'm going to want to be honored by people who make similar judgments about what's good overall. Right? So notice, here's a pretty obvious kind of case, and one that's poignant. So a lot of people in the Vietnam War, a lot of American soldiers won very high decorations like Purple Crosses, Purple Hearts, and so on. Right? They really did do amazing acts of bravery and rescuing their comrades and other things like that, and they got high awards for it. When we began to see the Vietnam War as a disaster, which it was for everybody, we saw it as a disaster. There was a real question. There were people who argued that those Purple Hearts should be withdrawn. What a shameful, you couldn't win honor in a shameful war. Notice we might think this about generals in the Nazi army who got the Iron Cross and other decorations. We might think, well, you shouldn't be getting an honorific thing for serving a corrupt cause. When we think that we should take down statues of Confederate generals because slavery was a terrible thing and they were fighting for it, we're making similar judgments. Well, what kind of judgments are those? Well, they're like this. You shouldn't be getting honored when the overall good says, right, you don't merit it. And that's just to show that honor and the overall good are in cahoots. Right? What you want is to have the spiritual desires in accord with the rational desires. And you can tell a very similar story about the appetites, even though they're good independent. Right? You may not be able to get them to share the judgment because they're not good relative, but you want to condition them, develop in you the kinds of appetites that are the ones that reason says you should have. So for example, consider diet. Well, what should you, if you can change your appetites, which you can, right? Especially when your appetites are still flexible and can be shaped, what kinds of appetites would you like to be motivated by? So when it comes to food, what would you like your hunger to be for? What do you like your hunger to be for? What's good for you to eat? And if you've been well brought up, that is what you'll want to eat. And you'll enjoy it and like it and get pleasure out of it. If you have to force yourself because you were badly brought up and now you actually crave food that's bad for you, you have to struggle against your appetites to eat what's good for you rather than what you want. So we're all aware of this, and that's a way that our appetites too, in a sense, we think, well, we'd like to have the ones that it's good for us to have, and not the ones we don't. So here's a place where evolutionary history is kind of screwed us, right? Because in the circumstances of evolution where our basic biological needs and tastes were shaped, salt and sugar were necessary. Salt was necessary, and sugar was a very high calorific thing. Scarce, unless you came across some honey in it. There wasn't any sugar, no refined sugar. And so the taste for it, and for fat, so fat, salt, sugar, these are very important elements in a diet, especially if they're scarce, right? When they become abundant, right, and you have a natural taste for them, that can be a disaster, right? Because you will keep wanting them even well beyond when it's good for you. So in a way, nature used to regulate it by not giving you too many of these things. So you notice our salary, as we call it, comes from getting our salt. It used to be that salt was scarce and necessary. So you'd be paid in part of salt, right? But now I'm sorry to say, or proud to say, you can buy as much damn salt as you like, right? And on the same way, if you decide you'd like to, eat a 2-pound bag of sugar, you can go buy one that's cheap and get a spoon and eat it, right? You don't have a good to do this, but you can. And if you've got a sweet tooth, you may be doing the kind of equivalent of eating it. Okay, so that's the picture, right? That's the psychological picture. And now we've got 2 questions we want to ask. And we'll sort of just develop these questions and then we'll answer them or look at the answers on Wednesday. So one is the question that Plato raises about this desire set, is to harmonize it. And that's what we've been talking about. You have to harmonize them. So he says they all sing the same song, right? You get it into harmony. What's that like? Well, we've already told the story. So suppose you've got your appetites have been shaped by your upbringing so that you really do like, enjoy, and want the very kinds of foods that reason would recommend you to eat. And you're satisfied by the amount of them that reason would. So, right? The thought is, yeah, you just like really good food that's really good. I mean, food that's really good for you. And you're not, so you don't crave any other kind. You don't want more. You're satisfied. That's enough. Same with drinking. Right? Yeah, you like a glass of wine with dinner, maybe 2. But you don't need to drink a whole bottle, right? You don't have to binge drink. You don't want to. It's not that you have to control yourself. It's rather that you just don't want more than that. And that would be the best, right? So now if your appetites were like that, they would be in harmony with your rational desires, right? You wouldn't find this happening. Your reason says, don't eat that. And your appetite says, I want it, right? And then maybe your appetite is stronger, and now you end up eating what's better. So you don't want that. Harmony is when appetite wants what reason would tell it to go for. So you've shaped your appetites, right? You like to exercise, you really enjoy it, you like a healthy diet, you like to look the right way, so to speak, and what I mean by that is you like a healthy looking body and not one that's emaciated or one that's obese. You want to go you want to get it right. And in the same way, you want to be approved of by these people whose approval actually matters because they're actually tracking something really worthwhile. You couldn't care less about the approval of those because you know they're deranged, right? No point in it. Yeah, that's what harmony is. And so you think, well, of course I want my desires to be harmonious, because otherwise I'll be subject to psychological conflict and potential weakness of will and all those other elements that come when they don't all sing the same song. So that's what you want to think about. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
The ideal composition or harmonious composition of the